When was the last time an elder in your family was wrong about something important? Did they acknowledge it? Were you allowed to say so? Or was saying so itself the problem? There is a form of authority so deeply embedded in most of the world's cultures that it rarely gets named as authority at all. It goes by many names: respect, tradition, family values, seniority, elders' wisdom. It operates in households across South Asia, East Asia, Africa, Latin America, the Middle East, and in immigrant communities worldwide. And it rests on a single foundational claim that almost no one stops to examine. That age, by itself, confers the right to be obeyed. Not competence, not wisdom, not demonstrated care or fairness or accuracy. Simply age. Simply having arrived on Earth earlier. I want to examine that claim today with the same philosophical seriousness we have applied in this series to conformity, to power, to free will.
Because I think it is one of the least examined and most consequential sources of harm in ordinary human life. Not the dramatic harm of headline oppression, but the quiet, cumulative harm of a system that systematically teaches younger people that their perceptions are unreliable, their objections are disrespectful, and their autonomy is a problem to be managed until they are old enough to inherit the same authority over someone else. This is not a video against family. It is not a video against wisdom or experience or the genuine value of learning from those who have lived longer. It is a video against something more specific, the transformation of age into unchallengeable authority and the mechanisms by which that transformation is protected from examination. Let's look at it clearly. Part 1. What age hierarchy actually is. Let me begin with a distinction that is essential and almost always collapsed in these conversations. There is a difference between two things that sound similar but are philosophically completely different. The first is respect earned through demonstrated wisdom, care, and competence. A person who has navigated difficult experiences with genuine reflection, who has developed reliable judgment over time, who has shown consistent concern for the well-being of those around them. That person has earned a kind of authority that is entirely legitimate. It is the authority of a trusted advisor, a skilled teacher, an experienced guide. You defer to it not because of when they were born, but because of what they have shown. The second is something different, deference owed simply by virtue of seniority. Not because the older person has demonstrated wisdom or reliability or care, but simply because they are older. This deference is not contingent on behavior. It cannot be withdrawn when the older person is wrong, harmful, or acting in bad faith. It is structural. It is owed regardless of what the elder actually does. And crucially, questioning it is itself treated as a moral violation, independent of the validity of the question. The first is a reasonable social arrangement. The second is a power structure. And the way the second disguises itself as the first, the way unchallengeable seniority dresses itself in the language of earned wisdom, is precisely the mechanism this video is about. Psychologist Diana Baumrind's landmark research on parenting styles from the 1960s onward drew a similar distinction with extraordinary precision. She identified 3 primary parenting styles: authoritative parenting, high warmth, high expectations, open communication, reasoning explained to children, authority exercised with justification. Authoritarian parenting, high control, low warmth, demands for obedience without explanation, punishment for questioning rather than engagement with the question. Permissive parenting, low structure, high warmth, few demands. The research on outcomes is consistent and replicated across decades. Authoritative parenting produces children with stronger self-regulation, higher academic achievement, better mental health, and greater capacity for independent thought. Authoritarian parenting, the because I said so model, the model in which age equals unchallengeable authority, produces measurably worse outcomes across almost every dimension of psychological well-being and intellectual development. This is not opinion. It is one of the most robust findings in developmental psychology. So why does the authoritarian model persist? Why, in the face of evidence that it harms the people subjected to it, does age as authority remain so entrenched in so many cultures? That is the philosophical and sociological question this video is here to answer. Part 2. How age hierarchy is installed. The mechanisms in the previous video in this series, we identified 4 moves by which power installs and protects itself in ordinary social life: naturalisation, moralisation, pathologization, and delegitimisation. Age hierarchy uses all 4 with particular efficiency. Let's map them precisely. Naturalisation. This is simply how families work. Age hierarchy is presented not as a social arrangement that was chosen and could be otherwise, but as a natural feature of human life. Children are told from the earliest age that respecting elders is simply what humans do, as natural as eating or sleeping. The fact that different cultures structure family authority very differently, the fact that the specific form of age deference varies enormously across societies, the fact that it has changed historically even within single cultures, all of this is invisible. What is contingent is presented as inevitable. What was constructed is presented as given. Moralisation, respect your elders' deference, is framed as virtue. Questioning is framed as disrespect. This is the move that gives age hierarchy its particular emotional power, because it attaches the weight of moral obligation to what is actually a political arrangement. When a young person pushes back against an unfair demand from an elder, the response is almost never engagement with the content of the pushback. It is moral censure. You are being disrespectful. You are being ungrateful. You are showing bad character. The question of whether the demand was fair is never raised. The moral vocabulary has done all the work that evidence should do. Pathologization. Something is wrong with you when moralization fails, when the younger person continues to resist despite the moral framing. The next move is to explain the resistance as a symptom rather than a position. The person is troubled, difficult, mentally unwell, in need of help. The persistent offer of therapy as a response to disagreement is a classic example of this move. It is not always cynical. Sometimes the person offering it genuinely believes it. But its function is clear: to reclassify a considered position as a disorder, thereby removing it from the domain of argument and placing it in the domain of clinical management. You do not need to engage with a symptom. You treat it. Delegitimisation. You have no right to that position. The final move, when pathologization also fails, is to deny the younger persons standing to hold their position at all. Not your argument is wrong, but you are not the kind of person whose arguments deserve engagement. Why did you choose to be born here? You'll understand when you're older. You have no idea what we sacrificed for you. I went through the same thing, and I'm fine. These are not responses to arguments. They are attempts to remove the person from the conversation by attacking their standing, their age, their ingratitude, their incompleteness as a person not yet fully formed. Part 3. Why collectivist cultures can't see this as oppression here is the most important and most difficult part of this analysis. Why is age hierarchy so resistant to examination in collectivist cultures specifically? Why is naming it as a power structure, let alone as a form of oppression, so difficult, so socially costly, so genuinely threatening to people who might otherwise be sympathetic? The answer lies in what collectivist frameworks treat as their foundational value: group cohesion. In a collectivist value system, the well-being of the group takes priority over the autonomy of the individual. This is not inherently wrong. Genuine interdependence, mutual care, and shared responsibility are real and valuable features of human life that purely individualist frameworks sometimes undervalue. But collectivism has a structural blind spot, and it is a significant one. When group cohesion is the supreme value, anything that threatens group cohesion becomes a moral violation, regardless of whether the threat is legitimate or not. Dissent threatens cohesion. Boundary setting threatens cohesion. Naming harm threatens cohesion. So dissent, boundary setting, and naming harm are all categorized as moral failures. Not because they are actually wrong, but because they disturb the surface that group cohesion requires. This produces a particular pathology. The collectivist framework has no internal vocabulary for naming harm that comes from within the family. It has a rich vocabulary for naming harm that comes from outside, from society, from strangers, from hostile forces. But harm within the family, from elders, from those who are supposed to protect. This has no legitimate name in the collectivist framework. The person who names it is not a victim identifying harm. They are a troublemaker disrupting harmony. The harm itself is invisible. The naming of it is the problem. Max Horkheimer, philosopher of the Frankfurt School, observed in his essay Authority and the Family that the family has historically functioned as the primary institution for the reproduction of authoritarian character. The family is where children first learn that authority does not require justification, that power is legitimate simply by virtue of being power. And once that lesson is learned at the level of the family, it becomes the template for all subsequent relationships with authority, the state, the institution, the employer, the community. The family that demands unquestioned obedience to age is not just producing compliant children. It is producing compliant citizens. Ambedkar saw the same dynamic operating at the level of caste. The caste system's genius and its horror was precisely that it was reproduced within the family. Children were taught, by the people who loved them most, to accept their subordination as natural and appropriate. The oppressor did not need to be external. They had been internalized. And Ambedkar's prescription was the same as it always was, prajna first. The willingness to examine what you have been given, even when, especially when, it was given by those who love you. Part 4. The psychological cost. What this does to people. I want to now be specific about what this system actually does to the people inside it. Because the philosophical and sociological analysis can make it abstract in a way that obscures the reality. The first cost is epistemic. When a child or young person's perceptions are consistently overridden by the authority of age, when their experience of an event is repeatedly corrected by an elder who was not present, when their discomfort is explained away as sensitivity or ingratitude, when their objections are treated as symptoms of immaturity rather than legitimate positions, they learn to distrust their own perception. Not through any single dramatic moment, but through accumulation. Over time, the internal voice that says something is wrong here becomes uncertain, then quiet, then almost silent. This is gaslighting at the structural level, not as an individual pathology, but as a cultural norm. The second cost is relational. Age hierarchy does not produce genuine relationships. It produces performances of relationships. When one party in a relationship cannot express disagreement, cannot establish boundaries, cannot name harm without social punishment, what exists between them is not connection. It is compliance managed through the performance of warmth. The elder may experience it as love. The younger person may have learned to perform love in return. But the conditions for actual connection, honesty, mutual respect, the ability to disappoint each other without catastrophe, are structurally absent. The third cost is developmental. Human beings develop autonomous identity through the process of differentiation, the gradual, often conflictual process of becoming a separate person from those who raised them. Psychologist Murray Bowen called this individuation. It is not rebellion. It is development. It is the necessary process by which a person becomes capable of genuine relationship, genuine thought, and genuine choice. Age hierarchy that punishes differentiation does not prevent it, it cannot, because it is a developmental necessity. What it does is make it costly, guilt-laden, and psychologically damaging in ways that persist long after the original family context. The fourth cost is political. As Horkheimer observed, the family that produces submission to age-based authority produces people who submit to all authority. The person who has learned that questioning power is disrespectful does not stop applying that lesson at the family door. They carry it into every institution they inhabit. They are less likely to challenge unfair workplace authority, less likely to resist unjust political power, less likely to name institutional harm. Authoritarianism reproduces itself through the family precisely because the lesson learned there feels not like political indoctrination, but like love. Part 5. The counter-argument, and why IT fails. The strongest counter-argument to everything I have said runs roughly like this. You are imposing Western individualist values onto non-Western collectivist cultures. The age hierarchy you are criticizing is a feature, not a bug. It produces social cohesion, intergenerational care, and community resilience that purely individualist societies lack. And the fact that you experience it as oppressive says more about your framework than about the system itself. I want to take this seriously because it contains something real. Purely individualist frameworks do undervalue interdependence, mutual obligation, and the genuine goods of community. And cultural frameworks should not be evaluated solely by the standards of other cultural frameworks. But the counter-argument fails on its own terms for 3 reasons. First, the claim that age hierarchy produces social cohesion is empirically contested. What it produces is surface cohesion, the appearance of harmony maintained by the suppression of dissent. This is not the same as genuine social trust, genuine mutual care, or genuine community resilience. Genuine resilience requires the capacity to name problems. A system that structurally prevents naming is not resilient. It is brittle. Second, the charge of imposing individualist frameworks assumes that the people harmed by age hierarchy are only able to perceive that harm through imported categories. This is itself a form of the delegitimization we identified earlier. When someone says this is causing me harm, when they name pain from inside the system, in the system's own language, using the system's own values against themselves, to respond with "you have been contaminated by Western individualism" is to deny them both their experience and their intellectual standing simultaneously. Third, and most importantly, Ambedkar already answered this argument 70 years ago. He did not critique caste using Western individualist categories. He used Buddhist categories, Enlightenment categories, and his own lived experience of what the system does to actual people. His argument was not "this conflicts with individualism." It was, "this produces human beings who cannot think freely, cannot claim dignity, cannot live fully." And no tradition, however ancient, however culturally embedded, is entitled to do that to people. Closing, I want to end with something honest. The argument this video makes is not comfortable. It will be experienced by many people as an attack on their families, their cultures, their identities. That is not its intention. Its intention is to make a distinction that matters enormously between the genuine goods that families and communities can provide: care, continuity, belonging, wisdom accumulated over time, and the specific mechanism by which age-based authority protects itself from scrutiny, regardless of whether it deserves it. Genuine wisdom does not need protection from questioning. Genuine care does not require compliance as its proof. Genuine love does not weaponize belonging. The elder who has actually earned authority through demonstrated wisdom, through consistent fairness, through genuine concern for the well-being of those in their care, has nothing to fear from this argument. What this argument threatens is not wisdom. It is the claim to authority in the absence of wisdom, protected from examination by the language of respect. Ambedkar wrote, "I measure the progress of a community by the degree of progress which women have achieved." He could equally have written, "I measure the freedom of a family by the degree to which its youngest members are permitted to think clearly and speak honestly. Not without limits, not without responsibility, but without the systematic suppression of their perception, their autonomy, and their right to name what they experience." Across this series, we have been building a single argument from multiple angles. Stoicism built the inner world. Nietzsche named self-creation. The conformity video named the structural pressure against it. Free will established genuine agency. Camus showed how to hold meaning without false comfort. The power video named the mechanism. And now this, the most intimate site where that mechanism first operates and the most important place to examine it. Drop a comment below. Did you grow up in a household or culture where age was treated as unchallengeable authority? What did it cost you, or what did examining it cost you? I read every comment, and on this topic in particular, I think what you have to say matters. Subscribe to Sovereign Mind. See you in the next one.